Okay, so thank you all for coming. Much appreciated. My name is Rob Leiden, as it says. My call is K1UI. I've been licensed for about 60 years, uh, since I was a teenager, and been in a lot of different places, done a lot of different things. Amateur radio-wise, I've done emergency preparedness. I was a section manager in Eastern New York. Uh, I've been a DXer. Uh, I guess I've got what 327 confirmed. Uh, Not much of a contester except field day. That I enjoy very much. And Director Kemmerer, who's director of the New England division, when he was running for director, heard a lot of chatter from folks about RFI and how RFI was making their lives miserable, especially the contesters and DXers. A gentleman up in Maine who had 60 acres of pristine land and a bunch of beverages and was a very, very well-known 160-meter contester, found himself with a pot farm right on the edge of his property and grow lights, which were causing him no end of trouble. That eventually took an FCC letter to fix. And we do have a process of escalation built into what we do in the worst case. So what is the process that we decided to create, and how does it work? Well, we have a website, and the website is on the New England Division website, and we'll go into the details of that later. The page that you encounter, so that's the page, what I'll call the starting page for the series of web pages. And you can see that we also here feature it in the right-hand side featured items. And we'll go into more detail about what's here and how you use it in a bit. But I just wanted to give you an overview of kind of what this looks like. And there are some hints, there are some warnings, there is a decision tree here at the bottom, and some links to general information that's designed to be helpful. So, what is RFI? Keyword is unintentional radiation in the EM spectrum interferes with amateur radio communication. So it's not intentional. And if it doesn't interfere with amateur radio communication, quite honestly, isn't our concern. We're concerned about things that do. Now, you'll see, I hope, at the notes at the bottom that in general statement, RFI is created when you have a device that generates less than perfect sine waves. And because it does, you get harmonics that propagate up through the EM spectrum, growing progressively weaker the higher you go. For that reason, being able to identify the primary frequency, where things start, is very helpful in determining what it is that's causing it. By way of example, power line noise is basically 120 hertz noise because you have some sort of a gap or a problem with a component in a power line that generates RF on each peak of the 60 hertz, which works out to be 120 hertz or about an 8 millisecond period. So if you see a buzzing on your radio, that gets progressively stronger the lower you go down in frequency and has an 8 millisecond period, it might very well be power line noise. One caveat: if you listen on a resonant antenna, you're not going to get that behavior because the resonant antenna will amplify noise as well as anything else on the bands for which it's resonant. So you have to use a short antenna or loop in order to listen to the RFI to get any valid profile of how it's behaving with frequency. That's like the number one problem that we have with people reporting RFI. They say, oh, it's strongest on 10, 15, and 20 meters. What are you using to listen? A tri-bander. Well, big surprise. The things that make RFI are too long to start listing. They're almost infinite. Most are engineered to prevent RFI, but some inexpensive devices can pollute the spectrum. The harmonics start at the frequency they operate at, and then they go up through the spectrum. I heard a rule of thumb recently that says 6 dB per octave, but I'm not sure that's true. They do get weaker. And we have a set of web-based tools to help users identify what they're hearing is RFI, identify the sources, and get help from volunteers. This is all part of a prototype process that we have created to sort of model what we would like to see nationwide. And the EMC committee of the ARRL is watching what we're doing very closely. We have obtained a set of RFI hunting equipment for each section, and we have currently over 50 volunteers who are using this equipment to help users to troubleshoot RFI problems. And how that all happens and how they get involved, we'll get into in a little bit. So how are they used? Well, we start with that troubleshooting guide you saw, and the guide has links to other pages. The most important links are the ones that guide the user to get help from an RFI team with the tools that we procured for their use. When the user gets to the point where they identify, the system identifies they need that help, there is a Google form that they fill out and a Google sheet that then is available to the team to use for reference when helping the user to troubleshoot a problem. Let's go back a bit and come over to here. Okay. And let me drop the share for a minute and go back. Okay, now you should be seeing a web page that says New England Division RFI Teams by ARRL section.
Yes.
Good. And you will see that on the page there are 7 sections in New England, and they have teams with contact information. And with one exception, each section has a team. Connecticut has 2 for Eastern and Western Connecticut. But they share an equipment set. And you will also notice here at the top you should see this form. Here's a noise report. And you click through and provide the information online. And this goes into a spreadsheet, a Google Sheet, which then is accessible by the team members to help the individual. Problem here we have determined is that individuals are not necessarily, I want to use the word carefully, sophisticated enough to provide good information. When the team contacts them after the fact, after they've read what the individual has written, usually, but frequently, the team has to go back and get clarification. Sometimes with intermittent problems, the circumstances for when the problem is there and the problem is not there is not well described. And there are other problems that we deal with when dealing with a wide variety of different individuals who have these problems. We also have made provision, you see, to select a printable form in case people, for whatever reason, don't want to fill out an online form. And there's also the ability to use some free tools available online to record spectrum and provide that in addition. And oftentimes what gets recorded, either by a modern transceiver that has the ability to record like a 7610 or a 7300 or a 705, these other tools like FreeCorder or Total Recorder provide other hams the ability to record as well. And those can be submitted along with the information for the team to see. Now, I don't want to mislead you. This is a very crude way of assembling a database of noise information. And although fine for a prototype system, for a production system would not be satisfactory. And we recognize that. Okay, let me go back to my presentation. And I apologize for going back and forth like this, but I haven't come up with any other way to do it. No, that's not what I wanted. I'm sorry. There we go. Okay, should be back in the presentation.
You are.
Good. Okay, so how do I find out where the RFI is coming from? Well, majority of it we have determined is of two places. But the majority is in the home, but if it's not in the home, it's probably power line. There are some more recent players, such as solar energy systems and a variety of things like electric fences and dimmer switches and control systems and you name it. But in general, inside the house or outside the house has power line. Those are the big players. And if you've recently installed a new device and noticed the RFI, it's especially likely. So we encourage people to say, well, what's changed? So the first step is therefore looking inside the home using the decision tree at the bottom of that RFI troubleshooting guide we showed you initially. And if you use the decision tree, it takes you through a set of steps that basically have you secure the power in your house and listen on a battery-operated transceiver to see if securing the power in the house makes it go away. A word of caution. People have done this, and the noise has not gone away, and they say, oh, well, it's not from something inside my house. But they forget they have uninterruptible power supplies with battery backups and security systems with battery backups. So you really have to pay attention to what's running in your house and know it in some detail. So if you do secure the main breaker and it goes away, you can be fairly confident it's somewhere in your house. And then the process begins of simply shutting breakers one at a time, or shutting all the breakers and opening them one at a time to see when the noise is affected. Now, users will often get to the point where either they do everything and it is in the house somewhere, but they still can't find it, or it's outside the house because when they secure power to the house, the noise is still there. Oftentimes, what will happen at that point is they will figure out that they really don't know what to do next, and they'll contact the RFI team. The RFI team has a set of equipment that consists of an IC705, like this one, an HF loop, a VHF, UHF, Yagi, and let's see, is there anything else? I think that's basically the equipment set. And recently, we have been experimenting with some software that was invented by Greg W4DD down in Georgia. So a laptop then becomes part of that, attached to the 705, and the IC705, which has both GPS and the ability to export S-meter readings. That software can then use to enable 1-second sampling of RFI and locations as you drive around. And then you can literally map the RFI on a street map as you drive. And we're in the process of experimenting with it to where we can deploy it to the teams as a production tool. The RFI team page ties to the equipment set. And by the way, the Melbourne Club just recently got another ARDC grant for the same type of equipment for their use down in Florida. And there's training for the teams off of that page, as well as information about the equipment. The kinds of things that you look for are in the Rational Manager parlance, Rational Manager being a book that was required reading for all GE managers at one time, is what the RFI is and what the RFI is not. And by characterizing it in that way, it is on rainy day. It is not on rainy days. It is on dry days, that kind of thing. You are able to test what you think the RFI might be from. And one of the surprises for me, and by the way, all of the really good stuff happens as casework that you learn things from. I thought that power line noise would get worse when it rains. Turns out there are two kinds of power line noise. One is microgap and one is corona discharge. Microgap typically at lower voltages and corona discharge at high tension. Microgaps, what it sounds like, small gaps in the line, insulators, tie points. When it rains, they fill with water and they conduct and the noise goes away. And when it dries out, the noise comes back. So if you see noise that sounds like a buzz with an 8 millisecond period that goes away when it rains, it's pretty much going to be power line noise. Something else we learned recently. So you have a 3-element beam or a tri-band beam of some kind, and you hear your noise on one or more of the bands, the tri-bands. And when you turn the antenna, you're able to get a pretty decent bearing on where it's strongest. And if you go from side to side and look at the S meter and pick up an S meter reading that's, let's say, 3 dB down or 4 dB, 5 dB down from the peak, and then if you go back and forth and note the azimuth headings and divide by 2, that's a pretty good indication of where the RFI is coming from. Furthermore, if you can do that, the chances are it's not coming from very close to the antenna. It's coming from fairly far away, like a mile or more. Because if it were coming from very close to the antenna, you wouldn't get that big change when you move the antenna from side to side. So there's another tidbit of information you learn about hunting RFI from casework and from learning what other people have learned about RFI through their efforts. I want to pause here to mention that we have an IO group called Spectrum Protection and Use. And the group meets every other month to talk about casework and ask questions, exchange information. And it's a very valuable way for the people working on this nationally to share information. And we regularly get folks from Florida and LAX on the call. Okay, so links and additional information. I think at this point, rather than just talk about these, I'm going to go back to here and just go through some of the links so you can see what they look like. Okay. So, is what I'm hearing really noise? If you look at WikiSig's, Artemis, and the ARRL laboratory website, you'll see that they have a lot of noise digital signals that you can use for comparison. And you may find that what you're hearing falls into something that in fact is not noise, but may be intentional on the part of someone. Because in fact, if you think about it, 30 meters, we share. Right? We certainly share 60 meters. Only have 5 channels. Potential RFI sources and the sounds that they make. Inside, what could be? Not an exhaustive list by any means. Outside, what it could be. Maybe that you find it in the house, but maybe it's coming from your furnace. Not something you can easily replace at reasonable cost, usually. So what do? Well, we have some remedies. What if I can't fix it? Phase canceling devices, cores and chokes, theory and practice of them. Some vendors with kits, and some information from W1VLF that shows what can be done with a noise canceling device. So there are some alternatives if for one reason or another you've got RFI, but it's not practical to simply replace it. Okay. We have the public domain database of spectrum files and sounds. We talked about some additional web-based resources. I'll click on that. Okay. And we have some videos and other pages on various topics like power line noise hunting and RFI noise hunting in general. Some are PDFs, some are videos, some are web pages. Okay, here is the logic tree. And I'll take you through a few steps to show you simply how it works. So do you have a battery-powered receiver for the investigation? Hopefully, yes. Okay, are you ready to open the main house breaker? Now, this usually involves the XYL. And also, of course, there's all kinds of things to get reset after the fact. So there's a little bit of playing that needs to be done, but let's say yes. Okay. So you open the main breaker, and either yes, it's coming from inside your home, close the main breaker, or no, it's not. Okay. Let's say no, it's not. So it's coming from outside the house. Do you intend to continue to find the source? Let's say yes. Do you have a portable AM radio and an AF sense antenna, small handheld directional antenna, or a step attenuator? Okay, so that enables you to hunt for a buzz if it's power line noise in particular. An HF sense antenna just means a short antenna, so you get that meaningful profile of how the RFI is behaving with frequency as opposed to using a resonant antenna. Okay, let's say yes. Okay, start the search, and it goes on from there. Okay. If you get to a point where you feel like you've exhausted what you can do, then you contact the local RFI team, which takes you to the RFI team page and the set of contacts to talk to them in your section, which also includes, of course, making this report using the form. Now, in the RFI team pages, you will get information about the team toolkits we talked about. As you see, there's the 705, includes a backpack for it, spare batteries, the DX Engineering RFI loop, the elk antenna, and so on. We also have available from the ARRL lab a radar engineering RE240 and an ultrasonic dish. Our team has an RE243 for the division, which is a more modern version of the 240, and also a 245, which is a small sniffer for local RFI within the house. We also have a place on the RFI team page for team training information, which has training videos, how to use the troubleshooting guide, some presentations, and so on. Okay, see how we're doing. Pretty well. I wanted to leave some time for questions. I see there are two things in the chat. Let me see. Are simple AM/FM radios? Yes, they are. You'd be amazed at how useful they are. If you tune a broadcast band radio to where there are no broadcast stations and listen, line noise, the buzz is very significant. It can also be misleading, though. I don't want to tell you that it's the be all and end all, and I'll explain. If you look at the profile of power line noise as a function of frequency, the reason that you hunt initially at HF or with broadcast band is it gets you close to the vicinity of a problem, but it doesn't get you to a specific pole. And that's because it looks more like a line source from a pole than a point source at those frequencies. And so the noise is spread out, it's more diffuse. So when you get to the vicinity of where you believe the noise is, then you start hunting at VHF. Usually what works best is the aircraft band on AM, somewhere around 100, 120, 125 megahertz. And you use a Yagi, and it can be even a tape measure beam you use for fox hunting will work fine. And that will get you to a specific pole, usually. Now, if you have an acoustic dish, that's even better because then you can pinpoint where on the pole the problem is. But most people don't have an acoustic dish. And my New Hampshire lead, KA1 RFI, the maintenance manager for Eversource New Hampshire, tells me that if you tell the power company that it's this pole they'll be more than happy to figure out where on the pole it is for you. And by the way, when you're reporting to a power company a problem, don't rely on the pole number. They change too often. Give a physical description of a pole at the intersection of this street and that street. And please get a case number. That's very important. Always get a case number. FCC guidelines for power companies are they're supposed to respond within 30 days to stay in the good graces of the FCC. That's just some background information. The best information I have is you or an RFI team, in the case of New England, working with the power company is preferable to any other way to try and resolve the problem. People writing to public service commissions, letters to the FCC don't generally get the response they're looking for. All it does is just start to involve lawyers. The links that you see here are basically those which I went through. I did not go through this particular one dealing with neighbors, the power company, and other utilities because it's very New England specific. We have a list of power company contacts in New England, phone numbers and email addresses for folks that need to do that. And some guidance on dealing with the neighbors, which boils down to do not under any circumstances let it become adversarial. If you feel that the neighbor is bristling in any way or does not want to be cooperative, back right off. We'll approach the problem another way. And don't trespass. We had one ham who was eager to find the problem, was certain it was in his neighbor's house, and arrived with equipment to prove it was in his neighbor's house, much to the surprise of his neighbor. And it does not go over well at all. So far, we have found that most neighbors, if you are polite and have a decent relationship to begin with, or no relationship, when you explain what's going on, tend to be cooperative. The links are available to be used by anybody. They're not restricted to any subset. And so if you want to go on anydiv.arrl.org/RFI troubleshooting guide, please feel free. And we're more than happy to get any feedback that you feel you'd like to give us, which you can get to me at my call sign at arrl.net will work. Okay, that is pretty much what I had. And now I suppose it is appropriate for me to throw it open for questions.
Do we have it? I don't see any hands up. There are a couple of questions in chat. Did you catch those, Rob?
Yes. Similar efforts, yes. As I said, Southeastern Division, in particular Melbourne Club, is doing this same kind of work and has gotten also a grant from ARDC for the same kind of equipment that we got. We received about $23,500 from ARDC, and they received somewhat less because they didn't need as much equipment.
Yeah, hi everybody. This is Gene in Killeen, Texas. Here in Texas, we have basically one company that produces or provides the electricity for the state.
Yes, you do.
And numerous companies that actually distribute it to the homeowner or business, whatever.
Ah.
Now, if we find a problem with the transmission line, do we notify the distributor?
Yes.
Or the actual provider?
No, the distributor. The provider is only generating electricity. The distributor is the one that's getting it to your house.
Okay, so start with them. Excuse me. And then, if necessary, go higher to the provider.
No, I wouldn't even involve the provider. The provider basically has nothing to do with the transmission lines, which is where the problem is. So your first step is to try and work with them, get a case number, uh, and work with whoever comes out to identify where the problem is. And if that doesn't work, and well, you don't have a team in Texas. It'd be great if you did. Um, but then I would say involve the ARRL, who has a relationship with the FCC. And so if you are certain that that's what the problem is, and they are not responding, then ARRL is the next step. They will write a letter to your distributor. And if they're unresponsive to the ARRL, then the FCC will write a letter to your distributor.
All right. Well, they when they come out to inspect the pole or line, will they also come to the residents to see if the problem is coming not so much from the pole or the line, but from, well, I guess the line or the system to your house?
Yeah, that's a hard question to answer, Gene, because it seems to be very situational. Some places like New Hampshire, where you have KA1 RFI in charge, they're very responsive, and the sense of closure is tremendous. I had a problem here in Cape Cod where they sent somebody out, and his remark was, "Well, all I can do is check and see if anything's loose," unquote. And they trimmed the vines way off the pole where the vines had encroached all the way to the top of the pole. Turns out that wasn't the pole that was the problem, but dealing with the vines was a good thing. So it very much depends upon the particular company, what equipment they have, how they're trained. There's some companies act like they never heard of RFI. Some companies are very responsive. It varies all over the place. The Melbourne folks have had mixed experiences with Florida Power and Light. Another thing that the power companies tell us is that you can't be too impatient, because sometimes, especially in this day and age, getting a new transformer or getting a new component of some kind can take a long time. So they may be working on getting it, but the closure as to what's going on might not be there for you. That's where the case number helps, because after a period of time, you can go and call them back up and go, "Hey, regarding case, can you fill me in on what's going on?"
All right. Thank you very much. That was a great answer.
Sure. Let's see.
Anybody else?
Yeah, I'm looking at the comments. Yeah. Okay, the comment was issues in the past coming out only during regular working hours, not helpful for something only happens at night. Well, even worse if it only happens when it's dry and not when it rains, which is very typical for power line problems. So you have to explain that when you describe the problem. You say, I'm observing this only when it's dry, so I need you to come out and look at this pole a couple of days after the rain has stopped. I've never heard of an issue that's only at night. That would be unusual. Dave, can you tell me what the situation was?
Yeah. It ultimately turned out to be a bad street light.
Yeah. Street light. Okay. Street lights are something, yeah, from time to time, especially LEDs. Oh, let me tell you another story about street lights. Okay. The town of Pepperell, Massachusetts, got this great deal from Eversource, the power company. Eversource said, "We'll give you all these energy efficient lights for free for the entire town of Pepperell. And we'll just charge you to put them in. So you pay us to put them in, we'll give you the lights for free." So the town manager said, yeah, win-win, right? We get the lights for free. We'll get our money back because they're more energy good. And they put the lights in, and we get a phone call from a ham who all of a sudden has RFI on 50.4 megahertz. So we go and we listen with our equipment. HF, nothing. I mean, nothing. At 50.4, we do hear what the guy's talking about, but what's happening is he has a 3-element beam 100 feet away pointed straight at the pole where the light is, with nothing on HF. Now, if you look at the emissions standards that our FCC enforces, there are no standards for conducted emissions above 30 megahertz. And above 30 megahertz, conducted emissions are fairly lax. Although we haven't proved it yet, what we believe is that because they were using incandescent fixtures before, which didn't radiate at all, that what he's seeing is the difference. And he's seeing S6, S7, I think, when he points directly at the light with a preamplifier and an ICOM 551 for 6 meters. So, and a 3-element beam. So the chances are that these fixtures are not compliant is probably pretty small. So what we're going to try and do is we're going to try and get one to test at the ARRL lab and confirm that. But the bottom line is that if they are compliant, there's very little that we can do. I mean, you certainly can't force a town to change out all its lights that are compliant. And so the best you can do is offer the ham some workaround solutions to deal with the noise as it is, which may involve some, phase cancellation, use of noise canceling equipment of some kind, and so on. So there's a situation where it's kind of frustrating, but it's about at the limit as to what anybody can do to correct the situation. We're going to try nevertheless, but our hands are somewhat tied. Let's see. Palomar. Palomar is a great vendor of ferrites and such, noise suppression stuff, and they do have a very good product. You want to be careful you get the right mix. In general, mix 31 is what's used most often.
I might add at this point, if you call them, they're very responsive, and they'll work with you to make sure you got the right product.
Yeah, that's correct. They are excellent. Town of Ypsilanti put in LED lighting, right? Raised their electric rates because they weren't using enough energy. Ah, okay, that's hysterical. That's interesting. Oftentimes these LED lights, it isn't the light. In fact, it's very rarely the light. Usually it's the rectification that's going on to lower the 110 volts down to the low voltage DC that the lights require. And so, you have some sort of a rectification circuit in there that may not have good filtering. See, that was Dave. So Dave, does it cause any RFI to HF when you go down the street in this area in Ann Arbor?
Yes, it does. You drive down through Main Street in the evening when the lights are on, when the street lights are on, and every time you go near one of the street light poles, you hear this terrible roar that just completely covers up the AM radio in my truck. Okay,
but how about the ham bands?
I haven't been running HF in the truck recently, so I can't.
Okay, I have the same experience in going down various streets where I get this roar, but when I look at HF, I don't see any problem. So Just the fact that it
Yeah.
may be, in your AM radio doesn't necessarily mean it's a problem for hams.
Okay, Gene, you got your hand up.
Yes. When it comes to the solar energy systems,
Ah, yes.
is it the panels on the house
No,
and or those interconnecting cables, or is it the box inside the house or on
no,
the
it isn't.
outside of the house? I don't know
Yeah,
how it works. I don't have solar.
okay. So generally, there are two types of systems that are in use. Unless they've changed, SunPower uses a master inverter with panels on the roof, and that is very quiet. Solar Edge and Next Gen, I think it's Next Gen. Solar Edge, Next Gen, and who is the other vendor? The guy that makes the backup generators, Generac. Generac bought a company that makes solar systems, and now they brand it as a Generac system. The Generac systems had problems initially. They've fixed them. They were very responsive. The ARO lab brought it to their attention. They engineered their problem, and they fixed it. SunPower never had a problem. Next Gen had some problems, which they largely have engineered their way out of. Enphase, thank you. Enphase is the one I was thinking of. And it is quiet. The problem, and unfortunately they have the majority of the market, is Solar Edge. And Solar Edge uses, as does Enphase, but Solar Edge uses what are called optimizers. What are optimizers? Optimizers are DC to DC converters that sit under the panels, and they provide they compensate for a panel going into shade, for example. So they boost the charge output in order to provide a more regulated input to the master inverter. So the optimizers, because they're DC to DC converters, involve a rectification stage, which happens to be very noisy. And I have a friend who has a Solar Edge system, and during the day, 40 meters is totally useless. 20 over S9, entire band. They're working on a solution which is supposed to be available this fall. And again, the ARRL lab is aware and have been working with them on that. Yes, I imagine it may. Field day solar stuff certainly is a concern. If the inverter is nonlinear, it could generate harmonics, which could give you a problem. So yeah, beware a cheap inverter. Okay, let me see what else we have here. Okay. I think I've addressed all of the comments so far. Anything else I can answer or take away?
I don't see hands raised. We're wrapping them up in chat. You're going to make a ride in money there with the hour. That's unusual.
Beware. Oh yes, doorbell transformers certainly can be a problem. Dimmer switches. If you're out in the in rural areas, oh, you're welcome. Electric fences. Oh yeah, electric fences. And those wireless dog collar things that have transmitters. There's that list on the web pages. Feel free to take a look at it. And if you know something that's not there and you think I should add it, email me. I'll be happy to add it. Appreciate the input. Okay. Well, with that, why don't I turn it back over to you, Dan, and you can take it from here.
All righty. Well, you did a great job and a lot of help to a lot of us. I've been really lucky. I have a solar system at our cabin, and it seems to be RF free. I have not had any problems on any of the bands with it, which really surprised me. I just didn't know what I was doing when I bought the solar panels, and I lucked out, I think. Okay, does anybody else got any questions? Anybody got any comments?
Thank you, Rob.
Okay, I just want to make one comment in response to something that Dan wrote. I have some RFI problems actually knocking out the internet. That's not the usual, direction that we worry about. Usually we worry about things that get in the way of us operating as hams. Having transmitter issues that interfere with other things is a different problem, and the advantage you have going in that direction is you generally know what the cause is. It's you. So if it's only on 75 meters on this particular frequency that sets off your security system, okay, well, probably you can ferrite your way out of something like that. But there are certainly a class of things that are very, very picky, very difficult to deal with like that. And it may take some engineering to deal with it.
I might comment at this point. This age of amateur radio includes a lot of computer stuff to interface with it to make it work. So I have had experience with electric fences getting into the computer side of the world and having to work those out. So it's broader range in some situations that they have to be concerned about. Paul, you got your hand up. Go ahead and take it away.
I do. The video I watched the other night that featured one of the Palomar engineering people, they did have a little section on suggestions for stuff for your internet slowdowns that happen. And there were some little devices you could buy there. I may be going to their store and looking around and calling them up. Yeah,
the other thing that I want to mention is, of course, fiber is much more immune to those problems than Cat 5 or Cat 6. Shielded Cat 5, which is Cat 6, is better than Cat 5 is. And of course, if you're talking about Wi-Fi, all bets are off.
I think it's DX Engineering has got noise boxes, if you will, RF eliminators for Cat 5 that you can put in there to help your shack out.
The other thing is, again, I'll extend an invitation to join the Spectrum Protection and Use IO group. It's open to anyone who would like to participate, and you're certainly welcome to participate in our Zoom meetings that we have every other month. The reason we have them every other month is my other part of my portfolio from the director is mesh networking, and so we alternate RFI meetings with mesh network meetings.
That sounds like you might put something in chat about that, how to be a part of that.
Okay, I will do that. It's let's see, Spectrum Protection. My typing is not great.
And while you're doing that, I want to thank everybody for showing up tonight and for turning your cameras on. That really helps a lot. Have your cameras turned on when you're talking. Did a great presentation and lots of useful information here. I'm sure we get a lot of play on the social media stuff. This stuff goes out on.
Okay, yeah, there is the group. I left it a hyphen. That's the Spectrum Protection and Use is all hyphened.
Okay, see it in there loud and clear. Well, it's been a very good presentation. I really appreciate you doing this, Rob. You've done well. You've done good.
My pleasure.
I'll give you another shout out there. Oh, wait a minute. Somebody looks like they got a hand up. Yeah, Dan, go ahead.
Oh, thank you. I wasn't sure if I had enough bandwidth for video, but we'll try it. Yeah, it was really interesting that tonight's subject was on RFI because I was just wanting to reach out to some of my local hams. My ISP, our internet's wireless, and so the ISP is kind of at their wits' end. They don't know what's causing these outages. I was just assuming it was a competitor with another wireless system that was bleeding over and knocking it out. But like I said, I tried to type it out there. The possibility that is something else like power line interference or something like that. So I guess I've got some things to look into to try to figure out what's going on with that. But this is a subject that bothers everybody with all the LEDs running around anymore and all the other electronics. There's quite a bit of RFI for everything.
Yeah, in the ham shack, all of our power supplies that we buy now, there are some analog, but more and more we're seeing the smaller solid state compact power supplies. And I was fortunate. I got one off Amazon called what's it called? J-Verity, something like that. I'm sure it was made in China for about $90. And it's very quiet and small, and it's 30 amps. So you can get small, quiet, 30 amp power supplies for a modest price that work quite well. It also has power poles, which is nice. And of course, computers are a consideration in the shack as well. They tend to make noise. And just trying to think of anything else in the shack that, no. Well, no, I don't think so. Not that occurs offhand, but that kind of stuff. Certainly power supplies. Oh, wall warts. Wall warts. I encourage folks, and I did this myself, so I'm walking the walk here. I got rid of the wall warts, and I put in this power supply with power poles and a distribution system. And even if it's not a major problem, it eliminates a lot of wires running around and a lot of potential RFI problems. So I'd encourage you to do that. The director here in New England is a weak signal guy on VHF UHF and was trying to do moon bounce and had an RFI problem. Well, it turns out that he had all these wall warts all over the place, and he was able to help himself a great deal by doing away with them.
Well, I think you've helped a lot of people tonight. I really appreciate your efforts and the information you're providing us. Okay, one last, Rob might comment on watching your clock. I don't even have to worry about my clock. Your clock's right on. Okay, are there any more questions or comments out there?
Real quick, will this be on the IO groups page tomorrow?
This presentation, the IO, the Spectrum Protection and Use IO group isn't a page. It's an IO group. So basically it's like a series of texts, and you log into it and you post.
Oh, okay, I'm sorry, I didn't explain myself too well. Dan, will this presentation here be on the RATPAC IO groups page sometime in the near future?
Okay, well, Gene, you need to turn your camera on. But other than that, what happens on RATPAC is that we have the presentations and we record them. Then, depending how late it is, I will either edit them that night or first thing in the morning. And then I get them over to another person who goes through them and puts them out on social media and all that kind of stuff. And most of the time, he doesn't add or subtract. He just puts out what I put out there, but he makes it all available for us. And he's pretty good at do it pretty fast. So if I get this thing to him, say tomorrow, I would have a hunch to be on RATPAC tomorrow afternoon.
Oh, okay. I wasn't looking at timeline, just whether or not it will be eventually on RATPAC IO group.
You bet you. We couldn't pass up an opportunity to put your face on RATPAC.
Dan, what's the best email to send you the presentation at?
You sent it to me at k7rex@arl.net.
You think that it'll go through?
Oh, it better, but if it doesn't, you can try Dan, DAN.MARLER @gmail.com.
1 second. Dan dot
Marler, MARLER
okay
at gmail.com.
at Gmail. Okay.
Okay. I'll say, I don't know how big it is. I'll send you an email shortly after we get off of here. And I also have a program for transferring large files just in case you need it.
Okay. Yeah, I'm sending this to you right now, so you can tell me
Oh, okay.
if it arrives.
Over the hills and through the valleys it goes. That when I got behind me there is a river that is very close to a mountain cabin that our family has in the mountains of Idaho. Those are the Sawtooth Mountains in the way in the far background there.
How far are you from National Reactor Facility?
Oh, Idaho Falls. Actually, my winter home is right here in Boise, and what are we? No, probably 100 some odd miles, something like that.
That's a ways. Well, the NRF is very, very large.
Yes.
We had a prototype out there from our program.
So, Dan, I was born in Moscow.
Oh, verify Idaho.
Yes, yeah. Right. My sister lives in Nampa.
Napa's become a pretty amazing town. It's taken years to grow into what it is, but it's become a pretty nice town.
If there's any message I want to leave you with, it's that again, what we're doing here in New England is designed to be a prototype system to be deployed nationally, but that doesn't mean that you can't simply copy what we've done and make it your own. It seems to be working, and if nothing else, it's a tremendous way to educate a lot of people and get them involved in fixing the problem. So I would encourage you to consider doing something, if not this, okay, then something like it. We have over 50 people, as I said, in the division working on the problem now. And we chose to do it by section, but I've talked to the director about this. It may not be a good model to use for less populated areas, and you may instead want to go with, for example, club approaches, where in the larger cities, you center your efforts around a club. That might be true, for example, in places like Idaho. So all it means is that instead of a section, you have a club on the same page as you would normally have a section. So nothing really changes. And it seems to me that what we're doing is very much in alignment with what ARDC's goals and objectives are. So I wouldn't be disappointed to see more people ask for a similar set of equipment to go and be more effective at hunting this stuff.
You know, I might add at this point, these presentations we do on RATPAC, all of them are, you do not have to ask me for permission. If you want them for your amateur radio use, your clubs, whether it be amateur radio or non-amateur radio use, feel free to download them and use them. That's what they're there for. Okay, Dan, you got your hand up, sir. Didn't know if I was going to hear from you tonight or not.
Yeah, I want to thank Rob for a real good explanation. I suffered mightily here in very rural foothills in the Sierra Mountains in California with PG&E's derelict overhead high voltage distribution in a very sparsely populated area. And things got worse when I installed the solar system. But with assiduous application of both ferrites on everything and toroids, all the toroids I could stuff into the inverter cabinet on everything going in and coming out of it, everything works now. And as soon as I'm done with that, they replaced the transformer on the nearest pole up from the Hardtop Road. And things got even better then.
What kind of solar energy system did you have?
Well, it's a 7.4 kilowatt ground mount.
Who's the vendor?
I pieced it together. It's basically a company that just recently got bought up called Simplify. I got 6 48 volt, 80 amp lithium ferrous phosphate batteries working off of the 8 kilowatt inverter from the 7.4 kilowatt panel. And I planned it a little bit on the heavy side and installed a 14 kilowatt propane generator that automatically comes on whenever the battery level drops below a certain level. So like a 10,000 cycle, 10-year guarantee on the batteries. And so far, we've been selling more power than we're using at the wholesale rate of under 3 cents a kilowatt hour for what we would otherwise be paying up to 48 or 49 cents a kilowatt hour for.
When I had a solar energy system, my prior house, I had about a 6 kilowatt system, and Massachusetts has probably the most generous solar energy program I've ever heard of. So I leased a system for 20 years and paid $15,000, paid for itself in 3 years. And the way it does it is you generate what are called state renewable energy credits, which are 1 megawatt hour intervals. And for each one, the state requires the power company to pay you about between $300 and $400. So I was getting the benefit of the power, not having any power bill, and I was making about $400 every quarter.
Wow. How big was your array?
It's about 6 kilowatts.
You were doing really good.
Well, you know how much they were giving
you mean megawatts?
I'm sorry. Yes, I'm no.
You said megawatt.
No.
Kilowatt hours.
Kilowatts.
Yeah.
Yeah. And
okay.
And they were paying me 25 cents a kilowatt hour.
Whoa. So they're paying us standard wholesale of just under 3 cents a kilowatt hour.
I know. Like I said, Massachusetts had this program.
So once they accepted the system, they gave me a check for $1,400 in exchange for a promise to provide them a specific, relatively minimal amount of current every year for the next 5 years. But as it is, it's just working. Where's some wood I can knock on?
Yeah, right. The problem seems to be when there is a problem, it seems to be the optimizers, and again, it's very obvious in the SolarEdge systems, which unfortunately, as I said, it's about 70% of the market. So we're eagerly awaiting this fix.
Well, California's Rule 21 is like every other California legislation. And how do I say it? A lot of people are making a lot of money, but not us.
Yeah. Okay.
And I have a comment about Idaho. My parents used to brag that they spent, oh, hush, Dan, they spent the last couple of years of World War II in Moscow because that's where Dad was duty stationed to check out mines for strategic minerals. And Mom went to the university there the last couple of years of World War II.
Oh, that is God's country. It's beautiful there.
Well, I tell you what, because of my prior work life experience, I traveled to most of the United States and I discovered every place you go. I don't care where you want to go, where place you go, it's got its own source of beauty.
Yeah.
I happen to like the mountains where people are really crazy about what goes on in the desert, and they have a right to be. It's beautiful there. And so anyway, I might add with the solar thing, when I did my solar panels up in the cabin, we have no power at all up there, so I'm totally off the grid. But we also didn't have any guidance in Idaho at that time for regulations and what's safe and what's not. And solar panels can be very unsafe, catch fire and so forth. So I put mine together using the California guidelines for putting them together. And I've never been sorry. That was a good move to make. I'm sure other states, maybe even Idaho now, has good guidelines.
Yeah, there's element of the electric code in Massachusetts which govern exactly how it needs to be wired up. And the folks that did the one that I had did a marvelous job. I mean, the system was virtually invisible from outside. Unless you backed away from the house and looked up at the roof, you couldn't even see it. So,
okay, well, we're head off in 14 different directions here.
Yep.
So I may have to edit out of this, but I really appreciate it. And all the comments, been very educational. I have not received your email, so I will send you one from me, and then you can reply to it all. And I'll put a link in there for big files and such. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, this is it for another day. For those that want a little bit of areas information, tune in tomorrow, same place, same channel, 73s.